Sure. So thank you, Shakir. Let me just pick it up here, and I'll speak on behalf of Gorana and myself as well. So as mentioned, we're going to talk about user and admin guide for optimizing Microsoft 365.
Yep.
It's kind of a things we picked up with different projects along the way. Might be some updates from Gorana side, but let's see, might we do a separate video as you suggested,
yes,
so we can
please,
actually share
if you
it
can,
with
yes.
so
Yes.
with additional information. So yeah, we're part of the IT Pro user group here, although she moved to Switzerland, as you might have noticed in the speaker lists, but still very active in the local community. Gorana is a Microsoft 365 MVP. I'm Azure MVP, so we kind of worked together a few times on different projects. Yeah. So as far as the short introduction goes, my peer, and hopefully we'll try in the background to figure out where and what went wrong. Gorana, a couple of links and information where you can reach out, including our IT Pro page. Yeah, we've been here in the IT business for a while, working on different operations and processes. Gorana is mainly focused on Microsoft 365, the modern workplace processes, teams, adoption, and she has really good stories on the adoption side, working for different entities and environments. I've been a little bit longer in the business. I'm an elder yelling at cloud, if I may say so. Used to work for Microsoft almost 11 years, so I know the good, the bad, and the ugly of the
the inside
Microsoft cloud.
Oh, so you are the right man.
So I know Microsoft 365 when it was Business Productivity Online Suite, the BPOS. That was the original name.
Exactly, that side.
Yeah. So again, if you have some messages or you want to interact with the Q&A, please feel free.
Sure, I will do
if
that,
I can, if I can revert to some question, I'll be more than happy to answer. So the concept of our session today is evolving around several areas which we found out during different planning processes, implementations, post-implementations, the adoption process and phase, jointly or individually. So we kind of figure out that this would be a kind of a nice touch up on the business versus technical requirements. I mean, we can talk for a week on that topic maybe. But yeah, we need to focus on this specific timeline. So I'm gonna throw in some things that kind of we found in different implementations important, or kind of things that need some attention. We're gonna share some tips and some additional information again, and what were the lessons learned. They're kind of a four pager or 4-slide at the end, and there is an option to do some Q&A and discussion as well. So the bottom line always when we try to build something, whether it's a cloud solution based on any cloud provider and technology, including Microsoft 365, is what's our starting point? Because that's the basis of our actual planning. And yes, it involves a specific process, and there are some differences, of course, whether we are building a house, whether we're building a stadium or a bridge or whatever. Maybe not from Lego always, but yeah, generally what we do, it serves a specific purpose. And yes, Microsoft 365 is a out-of-the-box software as a service environment, but the joint services and components inside serve a specific purpose.
Yep.
So we can never start with the full house or the full stadium or the full bridge at the end of the day, right? We need to determine what the steps are, how we're going to proceed, how we're going to move forward, and what are the actual important components of the process itself, right? So hence, we do a form of a process of planning. And again, we might always argue, yeah, but it's a small or a mid-sized company. And I assume that in Pakistan, or compared to Macedonia, there is a difference because we're a rather small country. And when we say a small business, it's 3, 5, maybe 1 person, 2 things like that. But if we go to, let's say, your specific regional or country-specific small, mid-sized, large organization, or we go to the States or Europe, whatever, it differs. But the process should be a form of a circle, right? We need to determine what are the goals. Based on that, start drafting I always tell people, do a form of a cloud adoption plan. It's a term that you'll mainly find in Microsoft Azure and well-architected cloud adoption framework there, but it's a nice kind of startup document to start documenting the process and things you need to do. And you don't need to do something that's too complicated or too complex or too many pages, but it's a good starting point to see, okay, this is what we want to do based on specific requirements, inputs from the organization, because it is expected that we guide them as the Microsoft 365 professionals in this case, the business, but also the technical teams on the other side, if they even have them. If they don't have them, then we need to align with the business. And experience shows that business and technical people talk the same language, but they don't talk the same language. Well, we don't understand each other always, right? So when we determine where we want to go, I always use the samples with COVID when we kind of rushed into the digital transformation and moved kind of to Microsoft 365 or any other cloud provider platform because of certain conditions. One of them being that nobody was allowed in the office anymore, so we had to do something. And there was a lot of mistakes done then. And that was a few years back, and there's still organizations trying to figure out what went wrong. But within that time frame, they rushed it, we rushed it, some people rushed it, some didn't. But in most cases, there was a kind of radical move to that environment. So there were no specific goals set, the desired outcomes were not set, right? So setting expectations was on a completely different level. And this is important because this will influence what type of strategy we're going to use. Because it's not just enabling the service, it's also what we do with the data we already have in the organization. What are the current operational procedures and processes? Because they will be definitely affected. What are the business processes we need to cover, and what's the user readiness level to adopt Teams as an environment or a SharePoint online or whatever is out there, right? We're not just talking about simply sending an email and that's about it. So there should be also a form of measurement and targeting in this case. So we need to determine how do we measure the success of a specific phase, and we need to go in a phased approach. We need to establish a force feedback. So how do we know that we did something good or bad in this case, so we can do corrective measures, or in the next iteration of our process, do specific things slightly differently, maybe. And yeah, it is a baseline. Now, whenever we draft a form of a cloud adoption plan, have a couple of components there, of course, but it can be revised, and I'm gonna kind of emphasize that.
But
so sure. If you have something, go for it.
My question is like, how if someone, a new business is coming up and they are like starting from very few people and they are projecting with like couple of like 40, 50 people within few years. So how you approach that business, that okay, they have asked you to come along and then you just need to going with them and then suggesting that Microsoft 365, like you require SharePoint or OneNote, or like the plan itself, like you need to go with Power Apps, or how you build the application and everything. So how you goes with the application, like what is the first step you would go and take with the business and just say like, okay, you cannot throw that Excel document and say like, just start filling up and then we will talk later. No, that's not the case, right?
No. You have to interact in this case. So yeah, if it's a smaller business, you might kind of, if I may use the term, cut corners sometimes, because ultimately they will see you as their trusted advisor or the person that needs to do proper advice. So on the left side, there's a couple of bullet points that might be referenced to that. So first at most, we decide what Microsoft 365 plan out of the whatever we have, right? And it's quite a few there. Not to mention the Copilot, which is kind of a hot topic these days. We need to see what they have on premises, because that would also determine whether we're gonna run it. So if it's a kind of a no legacy environment in the back, straightforward, right? We go for the initial services, setting up the accounts. Once we decide with Microsoft 365 plan, we do. we figure out what their some specific plans are in regards to their business processes, because I don't want to kind of overuse the term digital transformation process. It is a process in this case, but we need to see what are the Americans, or the English speaking world calls them the low hanging fruits. I don't always like that term, but we start small and then we expand. That's what I would always say. So yeah, mail is not maybe the issue anymore. As you mentioned, a couple of other technologies. Maybe it's something related to some business processes in the document management side. Maybe it's something related to the Power Apps. And then if you think about that one, it should be either maybe the mobile application. So I'm kind of freestyling here, right? Could be that. Yes. It could be related to Teams and integration of that Power App inside the Teams environment and doing some additional stuff. It should be part of the, what's my goals as an organization, what I want to do. You advise them of the process and how they can do things, and kind of create the chunks that will be the sub projects or the components inside, so I can create a kind of, okay, for this segment, this is what we're going to do as a part of the goals, and these are the desired outcomes, and then we define what kind of strategies. And that's not only on planning side, it's also how we move forwards towards the adoption and then the actual operations, right? And we don't skip things, especially when you see the last one here, train and then migrated selected users. Will this need to go through some process of knowledge transfer? If I don't have any baggage, so I can skip this deployment issues configuration, that would go through. But training and migrating is also an important thing. This is actually where the Goran a bit will jump in. So but I can cover it, no worries.
Okay, sure.
So from that perspective, might seem simple. But it's simple for the IT professional. I can set up the tenant, the enter ID, create the accounts, do the role-based access control, give them the access to the service, do the installation if it's necessary, or help them do it as part of the project or whatever. And then, okay, we can start running the Teams environment. We spent certain amount of time on developing the Power App. We put it in production there, and it's not done actually, right? We need to do a thorough planning, especially in the area what it's actually going to happen because of the information dissemination, but also processes that we need to identify in regards to how the specific organization handles their day-to-day business operations. For that, let's say Power App, we want to deploy, which will be part of the Teams environment. Because cloud technology, in this case, for them, it will be a disruptive technology. And it's not only for them, it's for everybody doing some cloud journey at the end of the day, right? The idea of introducing these services and components and capabilities that come with Microsoft 365 and the overall software as a service environment platform, it's what actually needs to be improved within those processes we identified as asking questions. So how do you do this? Or how do you do that? Because one simple truth is that not every paper or already established, let's say, manual working process can be digitalized in one-to-one ratio. There needs to be changes. And this actually tackles the habits of the users, how they operate the specific business process within their kind of, I'll use manual term, right? Manually. So once we digitalize that and put it in the cloud, it will influence that habit. Right. So we need to prep for that, because if they feel threatened by the new capability, they will go back to the defaults and start kind of going around the solution or the process, or trying to go back, complain, let's say, and kind of be dissatisfied of the solution, right? Which might affect the future of the project. So
and maybe they engage someone else as well.
They
try to engage
things
another
can
partner.
happen.
Things can happen. Exactly.
Things can happen, and this is the point when I said, so we speak the same language, but we actually don't speak, or we don't understand each other at the end of the day, because we push our knowledge on one side, and on the other side we have a group of people that don't understand what we're telling them, right? But what is this now? Why should they use this?
Exactly.
So bringing the value to the portfolio needs to be step by step. Kind of, if I may use the term, I hear a lot, let's say in the area of Eastern Europe where work, this model is too American for us. we do things differently here. So that, but I also heard that one in Western Europe,
yes.
organizations and people at work tell me, well, what you're selling here, it's nice, but, or telling us or trying to do it's nice, but it's kind of very American for us. We do things different. Yeah, I know we all do things differently, but when you break down to a normal business process in some form of a whatever small, mid-size or large organization you have, there is already an established process that does not differ from country to country,
Exactly,
but from
that's
person
right.
to person mainly. It's in our minds at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
So
That's right.
yeah, so disseminating information among the users is important, because you might get into a point there where there will be a feedback from the actual end user, and then maybe we can do something and kind of properly plan and kind of intervene in time if before something becomes an issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so starting, it's a very important thing, right? And it all boils down to where our organization is and how it's structured, how many departments are there, what's the communication habits of the people, maybe how many teams are there, is it on physically same location or is it dispersed? And when you talk about dispersion, does it cover multiple regions, continents, time zones, etc.? And then we need to define some form of a plan, right? Paper, notepad, OneNote, whiteboard, whatever helps us understand what's going on, right? The organogram, the process in the environment. We need to dedicate the clear roles, right? That's the responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, the RACI matrix. There is a nice Excel sheet. You can pick it up and kind of, if I may use the term, steal it from the cloud option framework there. It's mainly for Azure roles, but it helps in this way. So it's a construct. I mean, it's a methodology. It's not something that Microsoft invented. Many other cloud providers and let's say IT professionals use it from this standpoint. We need to define, right, that specific, who is responsible, who is accountable for specific component, who is consulted, who is just informed. And that's the communication plan, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Setting up some form of a modern workplace team, it's also important in a manner of speaking. So again, it can vary depending what we are talking about. So if it's a small and mid-sized organization, that might not have any form of IT present. If it's a mid-sized, large organization, they will have something, they'll have their own structure. Which also implies that the team might be extended, smaller, might include external use, let's say consultants or IT professionals. So whatever it's there, maybe a power up or whatever components will be there, but there will be a kind of a extended team that at a certain point might include external people as well, which is normal, of course. The ambassador program, it's something that Microsoft recommends, and based on Gorana's experience, we discussed this with her earlier, so I'm kind of in her place here. It works, right? And she has a kind of a great subset of examples about this, because this is her thing actually. It actually helps, because you can always find a non-IT tech enthusiast in the company that will actually support the process from an end user perspective.
Exactly.
They can be kind of in a process of on the job training of other people, collecting specific departmental requirements. So finance, I don't know, HR, sales, whatever the team structure is, and they can gather the from the field information and channel it towards the modern workplace teams. So we don't do something that they won't be ready for or they're not informed about that. Splitting the tasks, it's also important. So it's a project and then we design a sub-project. Kind of sounds maybe complicated, as project management could be. But in this case, it's to ease the burden on the modern workplace team on handling some input from the end users. And we can use the ambassadors as our proxies in this case. So we talk with them. So we kind of create a specific structure. And again, for a larger organization, this works better, maybe than a small organization. But it works, right? It gives the whole process a structure, and everybody is properly informed, as I told, and that's important. So they know what their specific part will be, or how that will be affecting their work habits, right? And we perform it on stages because, again, it's not about the destination, it's a journey. And it might take a certain amount of time, or might in theory never end, if I may use that, because right, the larger the organization, the more processes we need to go through, and there will be a little bit more time to do everything. Whenever we start something, it has to be small. I always say, start small, think big, but start small.
Exactly.
Right? So we don't go with the full capacity and
Yes.
capabilities of the Microsoft 365 environment. That's intimidating.
Mm.
I worked with Microsoft licensing specifically 25 years. That's intimidating from one side, because mapping these days the capabilities of the service to specific processes inside can get crazy.
I have attended
But we
some of
mentioned,
those. Yeah, I've attended some of the meeting like with the SQL licensing. Oh, that's it.
yeah, don't get me started. I can still beat Copilot or ChatGPT in Microsoft licensing. I'll tell you.
Oh, very good, fantastic.
Yeah,
Then I
spend
then I get hold
I
of
spend a
the
long
right
time
person.
working with Microsoft licensing. So yeah, I don't like
Then
it if you ask
yeah,
me that.
I'm
But
talking to the right person then, right?
yeah, so yeah, one of the few that can still beat the AI in Microsoft licensing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and hopefully it will stay for a while, because that's my thing.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, let's say, as mentioned, Teams, SharePoint Online, right? So we can aggregate the communication and collaboration capabilities within a kind of single pane of view, and kind of use the SharePoint in the background. Eventually, I'm talking about kind of cross Teams collaborations. I'm not going to mention OneDrive for Business here. It's a personal storage. But yeah, SharePoint Online, use the repositories, libraries, structure that it has, and its integration with Teams on the other side, right? So important deciding what services that are going to be included immediately. Right?
Yep.
That's how we do the milestoning and splitting up in a small segments. And it's important for several reasons we're going to talk shortly, right? We create the adoption plan, the program, whatever, based on this. So we define what are the milestones, we gather the business input, we create the milestones, we prep for the adoption process by creating specific webinars to disseminate information, do some trainings. And again, larger organizations might have a little bit more people that can handle it from an IT or a modern workplace team perspective. Let's use the proper term here. But it is something that helps, right? Create a form of an onboarding space, right? A simple group, or integrated with the SharePoint library with some files, including some information, where we can always go for some form of Q&A. Right? And this will be also a place where any new employees, you mentioned at the beginning, so if they plan to expand from 50 and then on a yearly basis add or within a certain time frame add additional users, this is the place where there will be a go-to place for those users as well. Whether we have an HR or not, depending on organization, not the point there, but it is a place created by the modern workplace team where the newbies or the existing users, where also the ambassadors will be there, will gather and kind of exchange information, do the updates of the education and everything, right? And organizing this community, it's important because it will help us with the feedback process. And I would recommend to consider that as well, because this will not only improve the kind of satisfaction of the users in the organization, but also help you learn when you need to do the next bit in a different organization, do the same process inside. So you learn by doing and they learn by doing. It's a kind of a two-way street in this case.
Exactly.
Now, from a business process perspective, and again, I'll tell you, Goran, I can talk about hours about this one, but I don't want to kind of overstep my boundaries here. The things I noticed from a kind of infrastructure integration perspective was the network, for example. Especially if we're talking about an environment that already has some legacy workloads inside their data center, whether it's a single server. So I found out different organizations have different concept of on-premises infrastructure, starting from a PC that has a file share of some kind, and they're in a kind of a non-domain network. Up to a co-location facility hosting their whatever data they gather inside. But even worse, the number of data we find, digital footprint on side a personal device of some kind, that's sometimes enormous, especially if it's a system where there is no direct IT operations or there is no specific infrastructure due to the size of the organization, so everybody keeps their stuff locally. So process of sharing and kind of collaborating, it's a kind of a completely different level there, but we actually start moving them to a kind of a more collaborative environment, which is a huge shock to the system inside. But from a network perspective, one side is the capacity, because when we do a hybrid scenario, we migrate an on-premises mail system, for example, or whatever document repository was there, we need to move that data within a certain time frame to the cloud, so we can actually continue the business operations on that side. And then there are several factors, and the next slide actually kind of throws in the what are, because Microsoft will do throttling, especially on the mailbox move. There is a specific process depending on how we integrate, what's the migration method, they will be throttling on the data. So we cannot move. So maybe sometimes moving 3 gigabytes of data will be slower than moving 10 or 15, but there are different parameters that need to be considered. The network stability is also an important thing, right? So I can have a very large capacity, but if there is too many network errors and a lot of error correction is done, that's a problem. A lot of time might be there, delays. In most cases, the delays can happen due to some form of proxy or firewall configuration, because there is a subset of not only the URLs that need to be kind of excluded from the firewall policies, but Microsoft periodically rotates the public IP addresses of those services, just to kind of shake down the DDoS and the foul players over there that actually kind of sniff the addresses. Yeah, so they rotate the inbound public IP address of the specific service, whether it's office.com or outlook.office365.com, whatever, they kind of rotate the addresses from the pool of addresses.
But you can have dedicated but you can have a dedicated service as well, like dedicated kind of IP, which is
yes, the concept, but that's specific to a form of let's say, well, the URL rarely changes. So they did a major URL change when they kind of consolidated the portals and rebranded some of the portals for security, for compliance, because there was a kind of I don't know, 30 different portals to which you can connect. So they kind of consolidated the list. It is advised that you periodically go to the Microsoft Learn page, where they publish actually what is the current set of the URLs, whether we're talking about the commercial or the government clouds, for example, the US government cloud, or the DoD services, but that's relevant to the US market. But there is sovereign clouds, like in Germany they have, in China, for example, they do have sovereign clouds where, right. So for those as well, they shift not only the URLs, but also the IP addresses, of course. But either way, it needs to be periodically revisited, because that might cause an interruption of the service. All right. So as far as the port for communication, right, it's encrypted SSL TLS, that would be fine in right, in majority of cases. But if the URL changes, we don't want to kind of allow a star-based rule for that. Maybe it's a restrictive environment, so we need to keep an eye on the list as well. But again, in my experience, they change them, but it's not kind of, I need to go there every month. In a couple of months, just double check, kind of once per quarter, half year. It's not that common change there, but be careful. But the more complexity there is in the network, as mentioned, if it's a distributed organization, multiple locations, then that implies, right, multiple appliances that need to go through maybe a different, some form of a VPN or interconnectivity network there. Again, I can talk about networks for days if you like. So this is just showing you how the true output goes depending on what migration we select. Now, hybrid is, let's say, most common in certain scenarios when you have a kind of a larger organization, eventually distributed. We have a lot of kind of data that we need to move. Now, this is just for mail, but again, consider that if it's a larger file repository, then we need to consolidate and map the services, and everything needs to be done. And even worse, if it's a local repository on the user's device, that means that we might have more than one PST file there laying around somewhere, and we need to find them. You can use third-party tools; they're quite helpful. Use them a couple of times. If they have some domain controller on premises, maybe use some policies, right, to influence where the file shares are and map the drives. Then we need to check those. But it is a process, and this just shows the mail. But there is also a process we need to do for the SharePoint Online, and there's some additional things we need to do, especially with the length of the names, the depth of the folders we're using. Again, there's some tricks. There's a couple of scripts that Microsoft also provides in that perspective, so you can actually check the file share if there is a too deep, right, folder in folder in folder in folder kind of a recursion there, and there is a kind of extremely long name of a file, or eventually some localized characters. So we need to prep the data. So that's also a process by itself. Now, as far as the kind of things, we need to determine, right, what, based on the RACI matrix, as well as who does what inside the Microsoft 365 environment. So what are the administrative roles we need to allow to the people handling things, with the notion that certain roles cannot be kind of overlapping, especially in the compliance side. But again, if we start small, we start with the small role-based access control model, let's say, so and kind of devise the metrics from there. If it's eventually, so I've worked in a couple of environments, and Goran has samples like that, although this is her side, but I'm going to kind of slip in some mine pearls here of wisdom. If it's already a tenant that operates, they probably don't have, especially if they moved in the area of, in the timeline of COVID, there is not a lot of restrictions imposed because it was kind of fast-paced. Nobody did the due diligence and planning, and there are gaps there, definitely. So from a governance perspective, there will be more gaps than in an organization that already has an on-premises process of some kind. So any specific restrictions that are imposed needs to be communicated to the users, especially if it was a kind of so we're talking about kind of, as they refer it to, brownfield, right? There is something there. It's somehow configured, the Teams, the SharePoint, whatever, and people are using it for a certain amount of time. I don't want to use chaotic, but it's being used as it is being used, and people have too many too many privileges there. Probably you've seen something like that. So once we start tightening the processes, we need to properly inform them. Otherwise, there will be a rebellion. They will overwhelm the IT operations with requests. So I cannot do this. I used to do it 5 minutes ago. What's going on and things like that, and they're gonna kind of complain in the vertical, right? So sharing outside of the organization, this is something also that needs to be totally considered. Now, again, certain premium licenses of M365 give us some little bit more governance and compliance in that area. But if we're using even the basic licenses, right, the standard licenses, we need to figure out what goes there. Because Microsoft 365, ultimately, it's a collaboration environment, which implies that certain things are allowed to be done, which we don't like external sharing capabilities. They're kind of fully enabled at the end of the day. They're trying to tighten that, but not always easy. But this is some of the things we need to consider, right? How to prevent certain information to leave the company, which is now part of the digital process. Any activity needs to be monitored, which will be used as a form of improvement, right? Which means a form of a governance process needs to be established. As simple as, what's the naming convention for our teams groups, right? And collaboration place. Do I allow the users to do this? Do I use, so there is a Teams embedded applications that's also community driven from different Microsoft MVPs. They actually, I think it was Team Genie called the application you can use for that, but you can also use a third-party tool. Not going to mention those here, to do a full governance checks, right, analysis, and then give you a reporting, and you can kind of manage that from the environment. Set up expiration policies to keep the environment clean of unused groups. I'll give you a sample here. I used I did a governance check last year on an environment which was rushed into COVID, a large organization. They had more than 1,000 groups inside, and almost 300 were not used anymore. On top of it, they had a governance policy for naming convention, but they didn't use it in that period when they kind of rushed in. And out of the 1,000 groups, 750 were properly named. The rest were kind of, I don't know what this group does. So I know by the name what it is, but I'm not sure when, how, what. They also had a lot of groups that didn't have an owner inside, for example. But in general, anything we do, it has to have some form of a test environment. Whether it's going to be a separate tenant, fine. Whether it's going to be a kind of mini SharePoint or a environment that we set up there, or a group that will do it with specific access. So we need to properly assign users to groups and then properly assign them to the test environment. But if you want to try certain things in a kind of a sandbox environment, probably an MSDN, right? Microsoft 365 developer tenant can do the trick. Or I've seen organizations actually have a separate subscription for testing, and they do policy setups and things like that. Might get overwhelming sometimes, but if you have a structured and let's say large enough modern workplace team, you can actually do a kind of use it as a detonation chamber for certain capabilities, and and do some proper testing and due diligence of any governance or security or a service that you want to introduce, and it will help you in that perspective. So for the external sharing, this is a real snapshot from a clean Microsoft 365 tenant initially set up. You can see that the SharePoint and OneDrive are kind of, anyone can do anything. So there's a couple of questions, and these are the most common questions we should ask ourselves or the Microsoft Modern Workplace team and the users, right? Who would actually need access to the content on the site and the subsites we create inside? Do they need access to everything, or it's a specific targeted site? Right?
Exactly.
So from the who needs access, it's not only the internal people, but also the external. We might have different vendors, or maybe contractors or temporary workers that has to have access. They need to have access to specific subset of documents, right? Is it only for specific documents, or it's kind of a bunch of documents there? Do they only need to view the shared content, or they need to contribute to it? Which users would be allowed to or be able to share that content with external users? We don't rely on everything. Anybody can do anything. We contain the environment, we govern the model, right? Which content on the site should never be shared with external users in the organization? And is it there some form of a governance policy or not? And probably it should be if there is no. Now, as far as the kind of a common errors, we sometimes omit that external users, once they're allowed under certain conditions to access the tenant, right, authenticate and get authorized to view the content, well, to access the content we publish inside. If we don't kind of tighten the screws, as they say here, they would be able to access certain things that we don't want them to see, or they shouldn't. Consider creating, in some cases, a separate SharePoint site that will be used to share content with external users. And again, maintain some role-based access control there, because I wouldn't expect that every user has access to everything we shared in sites. It's, again, what's the user's role in the environment? Exercising security and variance is important. Yeah, certain premium SKUs allow you to automate things like spear phishing attacks and things like that. But we need to maintain visibility control and kind of be aware of everything. Again, setting up appropriate permissions, right, important, never stressed enough. Avoid using anonymous guest links for sensitive content. Now, if we have data loss prevention policies and things like that, things get easier. But if we don't, this is the way how to jumpstart the security and governance of the model. Right? So again, it boils down to what type of Entra ID the subscription I have. Do I have the governance subscription from Entra ID? Do I have Microsoft 365, some basic package, or I'm on the premium side where a lot of security and governance capabilities are? It's all trade-off of the things I need to do and what I can do. There are some default things I can do, which is cool, but there are some things that come with a premium upgrade of the M365. Ensure that you know the identity of the external users, meaning that I don't need to know you personally, but I need to know why and how that person needs to be part of as an external person. What is the reason why they are part of the organization? And I measure how we can actually assign appropriate permissions and assign them appropriate access inside in the environment. Yeah, I've noticed quite a few times that external users sometimes don't receive the information. I mean, I don't like to double check, did you receive this email and things like that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but revoke and then reshare the same invitation. I mean, recreate the same invitation. That's what I would actually recommend to be done here. Any form of the site collection, it's a good practice to split them between internal and external users, because you can control the narrative, you can control the security and the governance model, and you kind of have a kind of a very you set up a barrier between the what's in-house and what's externally shared data. Right? Data access governance reports are a very cool thing, but they come with the E5, A5 subscriptions. If you have those, then use them. If not, just use one of the previous capabilities, and you should either use a third-party tool maybe, or do some, well, scripting might help in this case to do kind of a semi-manual checks there inside. Now, as far as the overall security capabilities, multi-factor authentication, this is kind of enhancing the process. Multi-factor, trusted devices, conditional access policies, and ultimately data loss prevention policy. But again, they come with a cost, although Microsoft does change this with the MFA specifically for the security defaults in Enter ID. But again, if you have a at least premium one, then you can run the multi-factor authentication. Conditional access policy comes with, let's say, P2, or as well as data loss prevention comes with a more enterprise or more premium type of subscription, but we can plan for that one. Right, we don't need to jump in immediately. It can be part of the adoption plan or future development plan. But again, if I go back to the what are the goals, it should be seen in the goals section there. I think we have a couple of minutes, but yeah, I'm gonna move to the end front, then kind of go to the talking points in this. Yeah, so I like the AGDLP model. It came out when Windows Server 2000 Active Directory was there, which actually is the acronym for accounts. Go into global groups go to domain local groups, and then assign privileges, which in a nutshell is a way to say, do not directly assign privileges, like the role-based access control model, to the accounts. You set them up in security groups and then assign them privileges, or they're in a I call them distribution groups. I'm an old school, but it's Microsoft 365 group, and then assign them to the service, right? They will gain access to space. So use that. It will give you a structure, it will give you a cleanness, and you can do better control on the access, right? Be careful in a connect, Enter ID connect environment with a hybrid. Do not synchronize. So the default enterprise admins, domain admins created in on-premises Active Directory, luckily, that was not the issue with the couple of iterations of the connect tool or the sync tool. So the domain or the enterprise admin, which was created locally in domain controller a few years back, it was synchronized with the cloud. That has nothing to do with the cloud operations. Now, those accounts are filtered automatically now with the new versions of the client, but then you might have some custom created account that runs your SQL service on a machine, or it runs the SharePoint service, or whatever it does. It runs backup, whatever. It's a local administrative account that has no business in the cloud side, in the Enter ID, which means it has to have no access to the cloud service. Because if that one gets compromised, it's then, right, domain dominance and lateral movement, things like that. So security defaults on Enter ID, these are the capabilities that come with the free version of Enter ID. And this is a kind of a quick fix. And I highly recommend it to be used in a non-premium license environment, especially in a small and mid-sized organization. It will enforce the MFA, multi-factor authentication for the users, enforce the administrators to use it, within certain, and then it will protect the privileged activities within the M365 admin portals or remote PowerShelling and CLI, right? If you have licenses to cover the additional capabilities, conditional access for users within the Zero Trust framework and policies, security external collaboration with Enter ID and Microsoft 365 capabilities, and privileged identity management. Now, this is the only exception to the first rule, the AGDLP, because with PIM, privileged entity management, I can actually dynamically move the user to a specific role inside the organization so they can do their task and then revoke it. Right. But then again, this is a premium capability. If I don't have it, then security groups or Microsoft 365 groups add the users there, assign them a specific role, or assign them to a specific set of resources, if possible. Right. So whenever you see the documentation, it will always talk about the premium features, but remember, you might not have the premium type of licenses. So we need to go for a kind of a lower hanging fruit. So security defaults, the HDLP model, and a kind of a due diligence in that area. Consider entitlement management, but again, that one is kind of Enter ID governance now license. Yep. It's a very neat, and it was a very underappreciated function for years. It's a very nice way, if you have the appropriate, of course, license to do this, to bundle resources that will be assigned to a specific subset of users dynamically and then revoke, whether the internal or external doesn't matter. Right. So it bundles registered applications in the Enter ID environment, specific groups and security Microsoft 365 groups membership, including access to specific portals and environment. It's a very neat way how to do it, but again, you need to have the proper license for the process. Yeah, and you can delegate administration. The catalog of resources can be created by catalog creators, so you don't have to do it from the IT operations. This thing as well. Yep. So let me kind of jump in towards the end here and kind of discuss some lessons learned. So strategizing is important, but never fall for the buzzwords. Yeah, I mean, copyleft is nice. Probably it will get greater during the years. It's the next thing, right? But be careful. If everyone uses something, it's not imperative that we must use it too. And I've seen a lot of scenarios where kind of the management falls for the buzzword. And it's a nice story, don't get me wrong, but still, baby steps. Yep. Business to attendees communication. Spend some time talking about this because this will actually directly affect the visibility and strategy. Because we push towards something we know, they push towards something they know. Yeah, we talk on the same table, but I don't think we talk with the same language at the end of the day. So it will influence the strategy. There will be no clear definition of goals, directives, perspectives, and then might get to a full failure of the project at the end of the day, unfortunately. And we always fear of the unknown. That's human behavior. When we like our comfort zone, whether we are in the IT side, the business side, the end user side, whatever development side, whatever we are, network side, it's always the comfort zone. And that's why during the planning phase, we need to do a certain thing. So any form of cloud adoption creates disruption. It's a disruptive technology. It's not only the services and the people are affected, which ultimately affects all the processes. And I'm not talking only about the end users. It's also IT operations, the governance teams, the security teams. Everybody will be kind of touched upon in the process. I mean, they don't flex and kind of modify and adapt, and we don't adapt the processes, it's a failure. Yep. As mentioned, inventory of the on-premises stuff that we accumulate and store inside the environment, it takes time. Yep. If I need to gather how many PST files are on different devices, it will take me some time, even if I use the tools. If it's shares or documents or whatever, the digital domain is huge. We kind of pile up things digitally because we have almost unlimited storage space. Right? Spend some time on the RACI matrix, because assigning too much responsibility to a smaller team is not a good thing. It's a burnout. Right? Yep. This will help you also determine when and what roles you need to maybe outsource at a certain point. Short, mid, long term, doesn't matter. It's something they need to rely on an external person. They do their thing, a bit within that segment. Thank you. Let's move to the next stage, right? As far as the planning phase, right? Use some form of, create a plan and use it. It's not kind of written in stone. You can adapt it, but don't overdo it with adaptations. This means that the original setup was wrong. So we talked, we did not fully understand each other. We did something, and then suddenly we realized we need to go back to the page one and redo it, right? So, and again, with practice, it becomes better. Trust me. My first cloud adoption plan was, I don't know, 3-5 pages long. sad, but I kind of get more proficient as time. Estimated timeline is a reference point. It helps size the process in regards to people, time, cost, and what needs to be done within that frame. It does not need to be a fully fledged project plan. It has to just outline what we're going to do so everybody understands. Do not move things to adoption phase just because you cannot do them in the planning. For example, this is very specific to training. Or, well, I don't need to do this governance bit. I can do it later. The company did governance with, they did a lot of moving. And this caused a lot of problems. So they had to do a lot of redos back there, and I'm talking about a fairly distributed organization with a very strict structure for certain things. Inside the adoption plan, map the trainings needed, whether they're for the IT pros, for the Power App team, whatever, modern workplace team, you can structure it or just structure a subset of people. It has to, I usually use mandatory, recommended, optional. And I prefer not to start a phase before the trainings are done. But the catch-22 is, most scenarios I found out that they're not doing the trainings. The problem here would be that when you talk with the team on the other side as the IT pro working on this, because they won't fully understand what you're suggesting during the planning, they might say, well, we don't need this, or they will even worse second guess you. I mean, yes, you should be the trusted advisor and they will probably see you like that, but that's the comfort zone, right? If I don't know what you're talking about, I'm going to go back to my defaults, which is the things I know, and either object or say no, or second guess you, meaning that second guessing implies that need to go back, analyze what you said, read, kind of educate themselves, and then come back. So it kind of prolongs the process. Doesn't foster good communication, but unfortunately I see it a lot. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to a situation where what I say in the project, it's kind of ultimate, godlike almost. I don't like that as well, because I don't have feedback from the other side. They say, oh yeah, that's good. But then, okay, is it good because I said it so, or is it good because it kind of fixes or serves the purpose what I said it? Because I sometimes, well, you won't get 100% of the information of the environment always. Yep. I actually, Dimitar, you are run out of the time as well. Yeah. So it's so it's So this is just I love to hear you. Yeah, I love to hear you. I just like we are on the same page, and I would like to have the more of your information, but I think we're running out of time. Yeah. So if you just summarize in couple of seconds, up to you. Yeah. Yeah, so this is the last thing, secure, govern, manage. Always look for the baseline. Actionable best practices, the cloud security, and always do education, whether it's end users, IT pros, whatever. Remember that certain things come with higher premium type of subscriptions, so be careful when you do plan. And decide on the operating model of the environment, which will be directly affecting the operations. Right? It's how the IT operations and modern workplace teams are structured in this, and race metrics. Yeah, fantastic. And again, thanks for the ability to speak. Unfortunately, I hope Goran won't object on my interpretation of her slides. Thanks again for the time. Apologize again, we're a couple of minutes on top of the other speaker. I think